I never expected a camping trip with my college's outdoor club to change my life. But there I was, standing in a parking lot at 6 in the morning, holding a duffel bag and wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. My roommate had convinced me to sign up, saying I needed to get out more and stop living in textbooks. I was 22, a senior majoring in environmental science, and honestly, I'd spent more time studying ecosystems than actually experiencing them. But here's the thing nobody tells you about stepping outside your comfort zone. Sometimes, the universe is just waiting for you to take that first step before it throws something incredible in your path. The trip coordinator started pairing people up for tent assignments, and that's when I saw him. Callum. He had this presence that was hard to describe, standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, dark hair falling across his forehead, watching everyone with these observant green eyes. When they called our names together, my stomach did this weird flip. He walked over, gave me this easy smile, and said, "Looks like we're tent buddies. I promise I don't snore much." His voice had this warmth to it that immediately put me at ease, even though I was nervous about spending 3 days in close quarters with a complete stranger. The drive to the campsite took about 2 hours, and Callum and I ended up in the same van. We didn't talk much at first, just the usual small talk about majors and classes. He was studying photography and graphic design, which somehow made perfect sense when I looked at the way he observed everything, like he was constantly framing the world through a lens. I remember watching him look out the window at the passing landscape, and there was something about his profile, the way the morning light caught his features, that made me catch my breath. I turned away quickly, focusing on my phone, scrolling through nothing in particular. Setting up camp was chaotic in that fun way where nobody really knows what they're doing, but everyone's trying their best. Callum and I worked together to pitch our tent, and I was surprised by how naturally we fell into rhythm. He'd hand me a pole right when I needed it. I'd hold a corner while he secured a stake. At one point, the whole thing nearly collapsed on us, and we ended up laughing so hard we had to sit down in the dirt. His laugh was genuine and unguarded, and something about it made my chest feel tight. That first night, after dinner around the campfire, everyone was sharing stories and passing around a flask of something that tasted like regret. I was sitting next to Callum, our shoulders almost touching, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool mountain air. Someone suggested we all share something we'd never told anyone before, and when it came around to Callum, he said, "I'm terrified of ending up alone. Not like physically alone, but emotionally. Like going through life and never really connecting with anyone on a deep level." The vulnerability in his voice surprised me, and I found myself wanting to reach out, to tell him I understood that fear because I lived with it every single day. Later, in the tent, we lay in our sleeping bags in the darkness, and the conversation continued in whispers. There's something about darkness that makes honesty easier, like the absence of light removes some invisible barrier. Callum asked me what I was afraid of, and I found myself telling him things I'd never said out loud. About how I'd always felt like I was watching life happen to other people, like I was behind some invisible glass. About how I'd never really let myself want things, want people, because wanting meant risking disappointment. He was quiet for a long time after I finished, and then he said, "Maybe we're all behind that glass until we find someone who makes us want to break it." I didn't sleep much that night, too aware of him breathing steadily in the darkness just a few feet away. The next day, we went on a long hike to a waterfall. Callum brought his camera, and I watched him work, the way he'd crouch down to get a different angle, the concentration on his face, the gentle way he'd adjust settings. At some point, he turned the camera toward me, and I protested, but he just smiled and said, "You're part of the landscape too." I felt my face heat up, grateful for the exertion of the hike as an excuse for my flushed cheeks. We reached the waterfall around noon, and it was breathtaking. The water cascaded down smooth rocks into a clear pool, and the sound was almost meditative. Most of the group immediately started taking pictures and exploring, but Callum and I found a flat rock a little apart from everyone else and sat down. He pulled out his water bottle and offered it to me first, and there was something intimate about drinking from the same bottle, my lips where his had been moments before. That's when it happened. I was pulling out my phone to check if I had any signal, and a photo slipped out from my phone case where I'd tucked it. It was an old picture, printed on actual photo paper, creased from being carried around. The photo showed me with my younger brother, Marcus, at his high school graduation. He was grinning at the camera, his arm around my shoulders, and I was looking at him with this expression of pure pride and love. Marcus had died in a car accident 6 months later, just over a year ago now. I carried that photo everywhere, a talisman against forgetting the weight of his arm around me, the sound of his laugh. The photo landed face up on the rock between Callum and me. I reached for it quickly, but not before he'd seen it. "Your brother?" he asked gently. I nodded, my throat tight, and slipped it back into my phone case without elaborating. He didn't push, just said, "He looks like he was a great guy." I managed to say, "He was," and then stood up, suggesting we rejoin the group. I thought that was the end of it. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for months, was that later that day, while we were packing up to head back to camp, the photo had slipped out again. I didn't notice, but Callum did. He found it lying on the ground near where we'd been sitting, and instead of calling out to me right away, he picked it up, looked at it for a long moment, and then slipped it into his own pocket. He told me later that he wasn't sure why he did it, just that something made him want to keep it safe, to keep this piece of me close. The rest of the camping trip passed in a blur of campfire songs, stargazing, and conversations that felt increasingly significant. Callum and I kept gravitating toward each other, our friendship developing with an intensity that surprised me. On the last night, we stayed up late after everyone else had gone to their tents. The fire had burned down to embers, and we were wrapped in blankets, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, our hands brushed while reaching for the water bottle at the same time, and neither of us pulled away immediately. The touch lingered, electric, and when I finally did move my hand, I could still feel the ghost of his warmth. Back at school, we started spending more time together. It began casually, grabbing coffee between classes, studying together in the library, meeting up for lunch, but it quickly became the foundation of my days. I'd find myself looking forward to seeing him, planning my schedule around the possibility of running into him. He'd text me random observations throughout the day, pictures he'd taken, thoughts he wanted to share. It felt like we were building something, but I was too afraid to examine what that something might be. I didn't realize the photo was missing for almost a week after the trip. When I did, panic seized my chest. I tore apart my dorm room, checked every pocket, retraced my steps mentally. That photo was irreplaceable, the only physical copy I had. Everything else was digital, backed up in clouds and hard drives. But this one print had traveled with me everywhere since Marcus died. Losing it felt like losing him all over again. I was devastated, but tried not to show it. I didn't tell anyone, not even Callum, though I think he noticed something was off. I became quieter, more withdrawn, touching my phone case obsessively where the photo used to be. The empty space felt accusatory, a reminder of my carelessness. Callum and I continued growing closer. We'd study together in his apartment, which he shared with a roommate who was never there. I started noticing little things about him, the way he'd bite his lower lip when he was concentrating, how he always made sure I'd eaten, the way his eyes would light up when he talked about a photograph he was particularly proud of. I was falling for him, slowly and then all at once, but I was terrified to acknowledge it. What if I was reading everything wrong? What if this friendship was all it would ever be, and admitting my feelings would destroy even that? There were moments that felt charged with possibility. Once we were on his couch, supposedly watching a movie, but mostly just talking. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and subtle. Our legs were touching, and he was telling me about his family, about coming out to them his sophomore year of college. They were amazing about it, he said, but I still felt like I'd shifted something fundamental in our relationship, like I'd shown them a part of myself that changed how they saw me. I wanted to tell him that I understood, that I'd never even gotten to that point with my own family, that Marcus had been the only one who knew and now he was gone. But the words stuck in my throat. Another time, we were at his apartment late at night, and I'd fallen asleep on his couch while we were watching something. I woke up to find he'd covered me with a blanket and left a glass of water on the coffee table within reach. He was in the kitchen, working on editing photos on his laptop, wearing glasses I'd never seen him in before. When he noticed I was awake, he smiled and asked if I wanted tea. Such a simple gesture, but it made me feel cared for in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Months passed. Fall turned to winter, and we developed traditions. Thursday night dinners at this cheap Thai place near campus, Sunday morning coffee at the shop where the barista knew our orders by heart, late night walks when one of us couldn't sleep. We were inseparable, and everyone assumed we were together. People would refer to us as a unit. "Where's Callum?" someone would ask when they saw me alone, as if we were two parts of a whole. But we never talked about what we were, never crossed that invisible line. I was stuck in this limbo of wanting and waiting, afraid to risk what we had for the possibility of something more. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, and my heart would race with hope. But then the moment would pass, and we'd fall back into our comfortable pattern. It was December, almost finals week, when everything changed. Callum had been acting strange for a few days, distracted, like he was working up to something. I asked him if everything was okay, and he'd just nod and change the subject. Then, one evening, he texted me asking if I could come over. There was something in the tone of the message that made my stomach drop. I walked to his apartment through light snow, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Was he moving away? Had I done something wrong? Was he going to tell me he'd met someone? By the time I got there, I'd convinced myself that whatever was coming was going to hurt. He opened the door before I could knock, like he'd been watching for me. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it, and there was a nervous energy around him I'd never seen before. "Hey," he said, "come in. I need to talk to you about something." We sat on his couch, the same couch where we'd spent countless hours, but suddenly the space felt different, charged with tension. Callum was holding something in his hands, turning it over and over. He took a deep breath and said, "I've been keeping something from you, and I can't do it anymore. I need to be honest, even if it changes everything." My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. He opened his hand, and there it was, the photo of Marcus and me, worn and creased, but unmistakably the one I'd lost. I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. "You had it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This whole time you had it." "I found it that day at the waterfall," Callum said, his words coming fast now, like he'd been holding them back for too long. "It fell out, and I picked it up, and I don't know why I didn't give it back to you right away. At first I told myself I'd give it to you at the end of the trip, but then I saw how much you were hurting when you realized it was missing, and I felt terrible. But I couldn't figure out how to admit what I'd done without it seeming weird or creepy." I took the photo from him with shaking hands, running my thumb over Marcus's face. Relief flooded through me, so intense it made me dizzy. "I thought I'd lost it forever," I said. "I thought I'd lost him again." "I'm so sorry," Callum said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "I kept telling myself I'd give it back, but days turned into weeks and it got harder. And then something else happened. I'd take it out sometimes and look at it, and I'd see you in that photo the way you were looking at your brother, and it made me feel close to you. It made me understand you better. I could see the love there, the loss, all the things you don't talk about. And I know that's wrong, keeping something so personal without your permission, but I couldn't let it go because letting it go meant admitting why I'd kept it in the first place." "Why did you keep it?" I asked, though part of me already knew, had maybe always known. Callum looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw everything I'd been too afraid to hope for reflected in his eyes. "Because I'm in love with you," he said. "I've been in love with you since that first night in the tent when you told me about feeling like you were behind glass. Maybe even before that. And this photo, it was like having a piece of your heart, understanding the weight you carry. I know it was wrong, but I wasn't ready to give it back because I wasn't ready to admit how I felt, and I was terrified that telling you would mean losing you entirely." The world seemed to stop. Everything I'd wanted to hear, everything I'd been afraid to hope for, laid out between us. "You love me?" I said, needing to hear it again, needing to be sure. "Show." "Yes," he said simply. "I love you. I love the way you think about everything so carefully. I love how you remember small details about people. I love that you carry your grief so quietly, so bravely. I love studying with you and eating terrible Thai food with you and just existing in the same space as you. I love you, and I'm sorry I kept your photo, and I'm sorry I took so long to tell you, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I realized I was crying. Tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't bother wiping them away. I love you too, I said, the words tumbling out. I've been in love with you for months, maybe since that camping trip, definitely since you covered me with a blanket that night I fell asleep on your couch. I've been terrified to tell you because you're the best thing in my life, and I couldn't bear to lose you. Callum reached out and wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb, his touch gentle. You're not going to lose me, he said. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time, waiting for both of us to be brave enough. I can't believe you kept my photo, I said, laughing through my tears. That's kind of crazy. I know, he admitted, laughing too. I'm sorry. It was crazy. But also it kept me connected to you in this way I couldn't explain. Every time I looked at it, I'd think about you, about what you'd been through, about how strong you are. I looked down at the photo in my hands, at Marcus's smile. And suddenly I understood something I hadn't before. Marcus would have loved this. He would have been so happy for me, would have teased me endlessly about being obvious and oblivious at the same time. Carrying his photo had been about holding on to him, but maybe it was also about carrying his love forward, about letting myself be open to the kind of connection he'd always wanted me to find. Thank you for keeping it safe, I said to Callum. Even if you should have given it back months ago, even if it was weird and complicated, thank you for caring enough about me to want to understand this part of my life. He smiled, that warm, easy smile that had first drawn me in. So, are we doing this? He asked. Are we actually going to stop dancing around each other? Yeah, I said. We're doing this. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to close the distance or pull away. I closed the distance. Our first kiss was soft and tentative, testing new territory. Then, deeper, more certain, months of wanting and waiting flowing into it. His hand cupped the back of my neck, and I felt like I was finally breaking through that glass I'd told him about, finally letting myself fully exist in the world instead of just observing it. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling like idiots. I can't believe this is real, I said. It's real, he assured me, and we have all the time in the world to figure out what it means. We spent the rest of that night talking, really talking, about everything we'd been holding back. He told me about noticing me in the parking lot before the camping trip, about deciding to request me as a tent partner. I told him about all the times I'd almost said something, almost reached for his hand, almost closed the distance between us. We laughed at our own obliviousness, at how many mutual friends had apparently been waiting for us to get our act together. That was 6 months ago. We're together now, really together, and it's better than anything I imagined. We still have our Thursday Thai food dinners and Sunday coffee traditions, but now they're dates. Now I can reach for his hand whenever I want. Now I sleep in his bed more often than my own, wake up to his face on the pillow next to mine. The photo of Marcus sits on Callum's desk now, in a small frame he bought. Sometimes I catch him looking at it, and he'll smile and say, I think he'd approve. I always agree because I know he would. Marcus wanted me to be happy, to be brave, to let myself love and be loved. It took losing that photo and getting it back to help me understand that honoring his memory didn't mean holding myself apart from life. It meant embracing it fully. Callum still takes photographs constantly, and I'm in a lot of them now. His portfolio for his senior show included a series called Breaking Glass, inspired by that conversation we had in the tent. The centerpiece was a photo of me looking out his apartment window, morning light streaming in, a small smile on my face. Under it, he'd written a quote. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be seen. I look at that photo and I see what he sees. Not someone hiding behind glass anymore, but someone learning to live openly, to love without reservation. Someone who carries grief, but doesn't let it define him. Someone who took a chance on a camping trip and found something unexpected and transformative. People ask us how we got together, and we have 2 versions of the story. The short version, we met on a camping trip and became friends first. The real version, we met on a camping trip, and he kept a photo I dropped for months because he was falling in love with me and didn't know how to say it. And when he finally told me, it was exactly the push I needed to admit I'd been falling too. Sometimes the universe puts people in your path exactly when you need them. Sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone leads you to exactly where you're supposed to be. And sometimes the person who keeps your secrets, who holds your grief carefully, who sees you fully and loves you anyway, is standing right next to you in a parking lot at 6 in the morning, waiting to be your tent partner, and so much more. I never expected that camping trip to change my life, but I'm grateful every day that it did.